Other explanations: universal operating principles. So the language mixing in children is also described or explained in terms of universal operating principles of learning a language. So you have this Slobin 1973 who argues that when you see children mix the languages, these are an evidence of some universal operating principles of language learning. So this does not mean that there is a unitary language system. It means that the children are only trying to use language and specific strategies related to different aspects of given languages. So they might use different strategies to learn different aspects of language, and their language mixing is actually an evidence of that trial and error in which they are trying to learn the two languages. So Slobin also argues that the order of development of different grammatical devices in the languages is related to the perceptual development in children, how much they are able to perceive the similarities and differences across languages. So their development of the languages will be different. And it also, of course, depends on the language characteristics, that is, how complex are the language systems that are being learned and how easy they are. This would also affect the learning of these languages. Similarly, Slobin argues that children mix aspects of different languages as an acquisition strategy. So if certain aspects of a language are easier to acquire and they're similar, more or less similar, then they will tend to code mix more there rather than less. Similarly, if the things are more difficult in one language or some items are more difficult to pronounce, for instance, in one language, they will sort of at times stick to the words or the lexical items that are simpler in the other language. Because for a child, please remember, language is a means of actually expression. So it is a means of expression for everybody. For a child, it's extremely important because he or she is actually negotiating an emerging identity, a self. So for a child, it does not really matter if he or she is using separate languages or the same languages. They are thinking about the languages in terms of efficiency. But having said that, this again is not an argument of a unitary language system. So this is independent of the representation of languages in the minds of the children. So these are what Slobin argues, actually acquisition strategies and not, as we said before, psycholinguistic processes at work. So simple thing we talked about before, if a language system is incomplete, the other is relied upon. Now please remember, even when we say bilingual children, even bilingual children are not exposed to the two languages in the same way. Neither are they exposed to the two languages to the same extent. So it is a strong probability that a child's one language is stronger than the other, and while the weaker languages gains more strength or the learning proceeds, the child will rely on the stronger language. And similarly, as we said, if one aspect of a language is more complex, the child will move on to use a language system which is not that complex, leading to language mixing. And this is not an evidence of the representation of a unitary language system in the mind of the child. So, reliance on available linguistic repertoire by the child is only a strategy of efficiency, which is one of the universally operating principles of any language learning.